My name is Samuel, and I want to say first and foremost that what I'm about to talk about is something that's very personal to me and my close group of friends, as we all collectively share the same experiences, although I've experienced more than the others. From 2014 to 2018, I experienced constant terror from something that my friends and I don't fully understand. We do know for sure that it's definitely paranormal. It started when I dropped out of high school at the beginning of my sophomore year and moved in with my dad. We found a mobile home for free that was out near Jackson Lake here in Colorado. To this day, I have no knowledge of who owned the home previously or what happened there, but I do know that something dark definitely still resides in that mobile home. People have been chased through the halls, and my closet doors would open and shut on their own. I've even been choked by something that impersonated my wife, which I will say is a story in and of itself that maybe we can talk about at another time, as it was a very personal experience for me. I've experienced sleep paralysis more times than I can count. During my time living there, it would happen at least once or twice a week. I'm really into martial arts and am extremely self-disciplined. That being said, I like to be in control of myself, so I learned through these experiences how to pull myself back into reality by moving my foot or clenching a fist because I hate being paralyzed like that. I remember one distinct time I woke up in the middle of the night with something standing over the top of my bed. Our house was heated by a stove because of how old it was, and the heat did not reach into my room. My dad was not a very good father in the sense of being able to provide. He was a drug addict, and instead of trying to fix the heating, he just had the gas shut off. So I used to sleep under a blanket oftentimes with my cat to keep warm during the winter. I remember waking up one night in particular where my cat was experiencing the same type of sleep paralysis that I was. When I woke up, I was facing her and she had her eyes wide open and her pupils were huge, and it honestly scared me. Then I heard the breathing. I could hear raspy, disembodied breathing right next to my ear, but I couldn't turn to look at it. Then I felt pressure on each corner of my bed around where I was laying, and I realized that this thing, whatever it was literally standing with its hands and feet over the top of me, with its face right there, next to my head. The only thing that was separating me from it was my blanket. I couldn't move or even breathe. I had never felt terror like that in my entire life. I tried to tell my dad about it, but he just said that it must have been the pale man, and that he sees him all the time, which didn't offer me much comfort. We used to hear things in the walls, and we thought that it was mice. We thought the cat wasn't doing a good enough job, and we needed to hire an exterminator, so we did. The exterminator found no traces of any mice underneath the trailer or in the trailer. There was one time in which I woke up around 3 in the morning, and we had been living there for about 2 years at this point, and I had experienced sleep paralysis many times, so by now I just thought, here we go again. But this time I could kind of hear what sounded like scratching. I was finally able to move my foot, and my ankle popped, and it was extremely loud, like if the sound had been amplified, and all of a sudden the scratching stopped. I was a little more conscious at this point and a little more aware of what was going on, so I was able to regain some control of my body. I realized the sound had been coming from inside the wall next to my head. It started up again and began moving down the wall towards the foot of my bed near my closet. Once it reached my closet, it stopped. And I'm not kidding you when I tell you what happened next still terrifies me and gives me nightmares to this day. My closet door slowly opened up about 2 or 3 inches. It would do that from time to time whenever I was trying to sleep, but this time I felt something watching me. The closet door was open just far enough to where someone could be peeking out, looking at me, and I laid there absolutely terrified, just staring at the gap in the door. I heard a whispering sound, and suddenly the door closed. I think what freaked me out the most was the fact that there are no handles on the inside of the closet door, and it was very hard to open and shut even from the outside. My wife has had her own experiences in that house as well. One night she woke up and saw what she described to me as a very skinny, naked man crawling on the ground next to our bed, looking up at her. I remember that night because she screamed bloody murder when she saw it, but when I ran into the room there was nothing there. On a night shortly after that, I remember waking up and hearing a female's voice whispering to me what sounded like prophecies of impending doom. It scared the life out of me. I thought it was my wife, but she was asleep. So I'm like, okay, maybe she's just talking in her sleep. You know, we've been together for almost 2 years at this point, but there's still a lot we were learning. But it wasn't her. 3 nights later, I was by myself sleeping in that room. My wife was gone, back to her mom, so I was alone. I heard the same voice whispering to me again. It started to really affect me. Everything had been going on for over 3 years at that point. I started seeking professional help, but the medication that I was prescribed just made me more depressed, and the doctors refused to understand that there was actually something paranormal going on. They thought, this guy is just schizophrenic, and because of this whole experience, I ended up going to a mental hospital for a short period of time. Not only did my dad and wife share in these experiences, but I had 4 friends experience it as well. One of those friends, whose name was Buck, was hanging out with me late one night at my house. We were playing video games and had a couple of drinks. Everything was going fine. Then all of a sudden we heard what sounded like something fall onto the roof. It was really loud, and I thought a branch had broken off of the tree above our house and fallen. So we ran outside, but there was no tree branch or anything to explain the sound. I got up there to look to see if something had fallen on the roof, and saw what looked like 2 footprints on the roof in the spot we heard the noise. So we got spooked and went back inside. But as soon as we walked back inside, a shoe came flying out of the hallway and went right past my head. So I'm thinking in a panic, okay, now somehow this person that jumped down on our roof is inside the trailer. We get the baseball bat and our flashlights and slowly go walking down the hallway. We searched the entire place, but there was no one there. My other friend, let's call him Ed, stayed at the trailer for a few nights while we were away, and he said that being there alone was terrifying. He told me one night he was sitting in the living area and he heard what sounded like someone talking down the darkened hallway near my dad's room. He said it sounded like me, so he got up and turned to look, and something came barreling down the hallway, chasing him on all 4s. As soon as he turned around to run to the front door, it stopped dead in its tracks, and when he turned around, there was nothing there. When I asked him what the thing that was chasing him looked like, he said it was a pale, naked man with sunken white eyes, a gaping mouth, and long limbs that bent in unnatural directions. This kind of activity continued until I moved out in the summer of 2018. I've never went back, not even to visit my dad. He always came to me. I've lived in 3 houses since then and have never had anything happen. I swear to God and on my father's soul that all the things I experienced there are 100% real. I'm also completely off my medications and have been fine ever since. I live in Glasgow, Scotland, and I used to live near an old hospital that has a hiking trail behind it that goes past a small lake. It's a very isolated trail that was used in the late 80s for a group of teenagers who had sacrificed cats and dogs to try and summon the devil. The sacrificed animals are still buried there to this day. All the locals said it was haunted and refused to go near the place, but I was pretty skeptical, thinking it was just a load of superstitious nonsense. It was really a beautiful place, so one day about 10 years ago, I decided to go for a hike there. I had been walking for about an hour when I decided to sit down and eat the lunch I had brought with me. It was a sunny day, and I was watching a cow on the other side of the lake when a group of crows appeared and it suddenly started to get really windy. I looked back over at the cow when suddenly it stood up on its hind legs, only it had changed. It no longer looked like a cow. It was now this tall, slim figure wearing flowing black robes and what looked like a nun's tunic. The worst part was it had these glowing red eyes. I froze in terror for a minute, then dropped the remainder of my sandwich and ran like hell. As someone who smokes a pack of cigarettes a day, it wasn't long before my lungs were on fire and I was panting like crazy. But I forced myself to keep running, wanting to put as much distance between me and that thing as possible. The strangest part of it all, though, was it felt like the wind was chasing me. I can't quite explain that part, but I've never experienced anything like it before. I ran all the way home and slammed the door behind me. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest, and it took me about 10 minutes for my breathing to go back to normal. Once I had calmed down, I tried to rationalize what had just happened, telling myself I must have imagined the whole thing, and tried to put it out of my mind. That night, I had an episode of sleep paralysis, and while I was laying there unable to move, I saw that same thing standing over me, staring at me with those glowing red eyes. It must have lasted about 20 minutes before I came out of it shaking uncontrollably. I looked around the room, and one of the first things I noticed was that my crucifix was missing off the wall, as well as a small golden frame picture of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus. I got up to see what had happened and found them behind the chest of drawers they had been hanging above. I hung them back up and went into the living room and found that my crucifix and picture of St. Patrick on my living room wall above the couch were also on the ground, lying behind the couch on the opposite wall. I was really freaked out by that point. The next few nights were the same, episodes of sleep paralysis with this thing standing over me and waking up to my crucifixes and religious plaques on the floor. I ended up calling my Uncle Patrick, who's a Catholic priest, and asking him to come over. I told him the whole story, and he blessed the house and me. After that, everything stopped, but I'm positive what I saw was a demon, and it followed me home. It was the summer after I had just graduated from high school. The year was 2001. My parents had gone away for the weekend. This left me, my younger brother, and my cat Goober at the house by ourselves. We had planned an evening of board games and snacks with a small group of people. This small group included myself, my girlfriend, my brother, his girlfriend Crystal, and my very best friend. We played a pretty lengthy game of Risk, but the girls got bored of that after a while, so we abandoned the game and started talking about what we should do next. That was when my best friend, Kyle, suddenly stood up and said, "I'll be right back." He went downstairs and out the front door into his car. When he returned, he had a Ouija board. None of us had ever used one, and my girlfriend kind of freaked out and said that she wasn't going to touch the thing, which Kyle said was fine, because you only need 3 people anyways. My girlfriend then heads to my bedroom to read a book while we prepped the living room. We dimmed the lights, lit some candles, and began to use the Ouija board. Me, Kyle, and Crystal placed our fingers on the pointer. Kyle was the only one who had ever experienced using these things before, so he led the session. This is when things got weird. First, Kyle explained to us that we should be barely touching the pointer with our fingertips. Then he asked, "Are there any spirits who would like to commune with us?" And as soon as Kyle finished asking his question, the pointer began to move. It moved to the edge of the board and onto the table in a way that put Kyle's arm over a candle that we had lit. Obviously, he didn't want to get burned, so he let go of the pointer. Me and Crystal had our fingers on the same side of the triangular pointer, and as Kyle removed his fingers, the pointer stopped moving for a second. Then it started to move back towards the center of the board. I know I wasn't moving it, and I could tell by the look on Crystal's face that she wasn't moving it either. When we made eye contact, we whispered the same thing to each other. "It's being pushed." In order for either me or Crystal to be moving the pointer, we would have had to be pulling on it across the board. It's hard to explain, but we could feel that it was being pushed from the empty side across the board. Once it reached the middle of the board, it came to a dead stop. After a bit of silence, Kyle put his fingers back on the pointer, and it immediately began moving back to the edge of the board and onto the table. Once again, this placed Kyle's arm over the flame and in danger of being burnt. And once more, Kyle lifts his fingers off the triangle, and as soon as he's let go, me and Crystal feel the pointer being pushed towards the center of the board, where it stopped dead in the middle. This is when Kyle said, "I don't think this spirit likes me because it keeps trying to burn me." As soon as these words left his mouth, the pointer very quickly moved across the board and stopped right over "yes" before moving back to the middle. Kyle asked, "Why don't you like me?" And nothing happened. Kyle then asked, "Do you not want to talk to me?" The pointer moved back and rested over "yes," then returned to the middle of the board. I think I should take some time here to explain that I am a skeptic. All of us were skeptics, except maybe Kyle, who had experienced a few paranormal events and was convinced his house was haunted. I was still not convinced that it wasn't Crystal moving the pointer, and she later told me that up to this point she thought that I was moving it. What happened next changed our minds. All of a sudden, my brother, who had begun quietly watching from a recliner, asked, "Do you want Kyle to leave the room?" At this, me and Crystal made eye contact as the pointer began to move and stop, move and stop. We never broke eye contact. We never looked down. But we could tell that this thing was moving with purpose. It came to a stop and stayed still. When we knew it was done, Crystal asked, "What did it spell?" To which my brother replied, "Yes, please." Kyle nodded and explained to us that it's not wise to piss these spirits off, so he gets up and goes into my bedroom to hang out with my girlfriend. Once we hear the bedroom door shut, my brother asks, "Why don't you like Kyle?" The pointer spelled out, "No telling." We changed the subject, and the questions and answers continued. I don't remember exactly what was asked or what was said in response during this part of the evening. Only thing I know is that my brother's questions were answered, and only when it was me and Crystal touching the pointer. At some point, my brother asked, "Are you able to possess someone in this room?" It responded, "Yes," and continued to immediately spell Goober. This is when my cat Goober quickly ran into the room, jumped up onto the empty rocking chair, and just stared at us. "Hello," the pointer spelled once my cat was settled onto the chair. I want to stop, but yet strangely, I'm compelled to continue. The questions and answers continued for a bit, the subjects of which I don't recall, but at some point my brother asked, "Can you see our deaths?" The reply didn't surprise me. "Yes." "Who in this house dies first?" I don't like where this session was going, but I hold on. "Kyle," says the board. At this point, I am just staring at my cat, barely aware I was even touching the pointer anymore, when I hear my bedroom door open. The pointer moves to goodbye as my cat jumps off the chair and passes Kyle as he enters the room. This is when things went from weird to insane. As soon as Kyle sits down in the chair that was occupied by my cat seconds before, the pointer starts to move in a circle, faster and faster. I can't explain how it felt having my fingers on the pointer, as it was very quickly moving in these tight, controlled circles. The best way I can explain it is that it felt like there was an invisible circular barrier that was around the pointer. It felt like the edge of the pointer was being pushed up against this invisible force field as it circled its border. The pointer never left this barrier, and it felt as if it was being maneuvered from the middle. Faster and faster it moved in this seemingly perfect circle. Me and Crystal made eye contact, and we know what the other person is thinking. So we nod at each other and lift our hands off the pointer. As we do this, the pointer stops moving, but not right away. For a split second, it seems like the momentum keeps it sliding across the board, but not in a straight line. We all fell silent. Me and Crystal are both breathing heavily due to the physical exertion of having the pointer move our arms around in a tight circle with our hands following its movements. It was a gorgeous night outside this particular evening, but as soon as we broke contact with the pointer, the wind picked up outside. Saying it picked up paints the wrong picture. In actuality, the wind went from non-existent to the strongest gusts I've ever seen. It was howling. All of a sudden, pine cones began hitting the large sliding glass on the door behind us, one after the other after the other. It sounded like they were going to break through the glass. We all stood up and took a few steps back, away from the sliding glass door, and that was when we noticed the wind was actually bending the glass of the door. The wind and barrage of pine cones against the glass built up to a crescendo, and just as quickly as it began, it stopped. Dead silence. Not even the slightest hint of a breeze outside anymore. No one knew what to say, so we didn't say anything. Kyle packed up his stuff and drove home. My brother walked his girlfriend home and spent the night at her place, and I went to my bedroom and fell asleep next to my already sleeping girlfriend. During the next couple days, I noticed some things. It felt like we were at the Ouija board for like an hour tops, but when I went to bed, the sun was beginning to rise, so that makes it about 6 hours of Ouija board time at least. Also, there was no debris outside from this massive windstorm, no pine cones and no branches. And when I asked people about the wind, no one knew what I was talking about. The most unsettling thing of this whole ordeal was that Kyle was the first of us to die. 1 year after that night, he would perish in a car accident on Christmas morning. He burned to death.